So ego's origin story, that he was just a consciousness floating in the void that slowly realized itself and then began to assemble matter and then started looking for connection, like that whole thing. That is the esoteric story of where God came from. So, and I know this because I spent 20 years in that New Age world where the Bible is not allowed, except, if you're pulling, mystical truths from it that aren't actually there. But in the story of like Kabbalism, occultism, that there's the question, where did God come from? In that world, God, it's not really clear what God didn't self-create. God just popped into existence, realized that it was alone. God realized, we'll say he, just for convenience. But in the mystical esoteric, like God doesn't have a gender. So we don't have so it isn't exactly right. So we'll say he without saying that God is masculine in that frame. It's just easier as a figure of speech. So hear it that way. He realized he was alone and essentially created the universe to not be alone. Right. And that's the whole Buddhist, Hindu, like this unitary consciousness, like God created otherness to not be alone. So while the average, atheist, secular viewer might be tempted to do that in a way, might see it that way, and like pieces, the occult, esoteric understanding of God, that's exactly what it's supposed to communicate, which isn't surprising because they're all occultists in Hollywood anyway.
Yeah. So then I guess the follow-up question is whether that's more in the occult world, and I'm sure the way you would communicate to people of various positions and various belief systems can be different and probably should be different. But so how would you then, as a believer, help them to understand that this is not what God is like, that this is not. So if I'm let's say I'm talking to, a group of teenagers or something that is watching Guardians of the Galaxy at my house or something like that. And this movie is, talks about deity. It talks about being a God and all of those things. And we can see that this is probably what an unbeliever sees God to be. Then the follow-up question is, how do you communicate with somebody to teach them and show them that this is not who God is, and that we can actually see that this is not at all what the Bible says God's character is?